So if I didn't quit now, something horrible was going to happen. I'd get hooked on it. And so I quit and I started a whole other level of recovery. Because you see, stopping something isn't the goal. It's starting something else. It's using the stopping, the limitation as an excuse to start to grow. Now, from New Life Ministries, this is Going Deeper with Stephen Arterburn. I'm Stephen Arterburn. And Going Deeper is all about taking the tough issues, the hard issues of life, looking a little bit deeper inside so that we can gain some insight into our lives. Hi there, Steve Arterburn here, and thanks for joining me for Going Deeper. Today I want to talk to you about a really important concept. I want to start at the beginning. I want to start at the bottom. I want to start with number one. One thing I want to talk about, and it's this. Everybody in this fallen world in which we live, all of us have at least one, here it comes, extreme limitation. You know, we want the world to all just work out wonderfully. Like when we're about to have a crash, we would love for these amazing bumper things to come out and you just bounce off the other car and everybody would be happy and no sorrow. That's the way we want it. But Adam and Eve blew it in the garden. And they didn't just blow it for Adam and Eve, they blew it for all of us. And the only way I can kind of live with it is to know that if I had been there, I would have done exactly the same thing. So we have a choice, and it's a fallen world, and we're not in the garden, and it hurts. We have problems, and we develop all sorts of kind of destructive and dissatisfying and inadequate ways of coping with the problems that we have in this fallen world. For instance, here's one. We try harder. And the harder we try, the harder it becomes to try. We just get ourselves in deeper and deeper in whatever mess that we're in until we realize trying harder is not making this better. If trying harder makes something better, you're not dealing with it anymore because it made it better, right? And you've moved on. You grew. You're not acting like a 6-year-old anymore. Well, most of us aren't acting like a 6-year-old anymore. So we try harder. Or, we say, well, I would, but I can't. And so we just act like we're helpless. And boy, people in that learned helpless state are really tough to deal with. Because no matter what you say to a person in the helpless state, well, they'll kind of give you an excuse, or they'll blame or whatever, so that they can just stay helpless. And isn't it really the most unrealistic expectation of all that somebody's going to come along and take care of you, fix everything for you? Then here's another thing that we try to do. Maybe we're doing something and we say it's not a problem because we can quit doing it anytime. I was explaining to my children that I ended up with, well, it was a very humiliating and very tough addiction. It was cigarettes. I worked in a clothing store and everybody there smoked, and all of a sudden I have a habit. I don't know what they did with theirs, but I quit my habit 20 to 30 times. I quit my habit. And every time I would be around somebody that was smoking, pretty soon I'm crackling that little cellophane on their cigarette pack and holding a cigarette, putting it to my lips, and pretty soon I'm smoking again. I had to admit something. I had to admit that I, in and of myself, had an extreme limitation. All of us have at least, here's the number, one extreme limitation. And no matter how hard you try on your own, it's just not going to get better. So I decided that since I couldn't do it on my own, I needed help. I got help from a physician who actually prescribed a medication that would lower the craving for the first 6 weeks. and I'd never have to take it again. Okay, so I did that. I saw a counselor, and I asked him to help me keep my commitment to what I was about to do. And here's what it was. I committed to not quit smoking. I committed to never, in the history of my life going forward, never touch a package of cigarettes again. I made that commitment. So I wasn't stopping smoking. I was never gonna touch a pack of cigarettes again, because I had an extreme limitation. I couldn't quit. And if I never touched the pack, that'd be a great start. Then I made a commitment to never hold a cigarette in my hand ever again. So I wasn't stopping smoking. I was stopping holding cigarette packages and stopping touching cigarettes. And a third commitment that I made, if somehow I woke up and a cigarette was stuck on my lips, I would not light that cigarette. Okay? So, got the help, got the medication, made the commitments, and I am still true to that commitment today. One day a man was in my car, and when he got out, a pack of cigarettes. He didn't see it, I didn't, but I got in the next morning and there was a pack of cigarettes laying on the floor. I went in the house, I got some ice tongs, picked them up and threw them in the trash. Never touched it. We were on a cruise, my wife and I, first year we were married, and from a deck above, somebody dropped a pack of cigarettes out on the deck. And I went in and I into the room and got 2 forks and picked those up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'll tell you later." And I didn't touch that pack either. So you see, I needed help, I needed support, I needed resources. I really began recovery when I discovered I had another extreme limitation. And that is that I didn't just drink 1 glass of wine, I drank a bottle of wine or more. And one day when my wife said, "Do you think you might be having a problem with alcohol?" I said, "You know what? I've been wondering that myself." Because I knew the one thing that all alcoholics had in common was that their tolerance was high. And my tolerance was going up. So if I didn't quit now, something horrible was going to happen. I'd get hooked on it. And so I quit and I started a whole other level of recovery. Because you see, stopping something isn't the goal. It's starting something else. It's using the stopping, the limitation as an excuse to start to grow. Now, we're in a society and many times a church culture that says that we should be self-sufficient and that we ought to have our act together. So a lot of times when it would be really great for us to say to our church friends, "Hey, I'm really struggling here." Oh, we don't want to look bad. We don't want to look weak, so we don't do it. Or we're trying to prove to the world that we are absolutely in good shape, got it together. Well, maybe we ought to give up that self-sufficiency, because if we have an extreme limitation, we're going to need all the help we can get. It's a big deal these days to say, "I'm going to go off grid." Well, sometimes, of course that means not using power, the power grid. But sometimes we go off God's grid and we quit using God's power, which is the thing that could really help us with that, here it is again, number 1, extreme limitation. So it's really kind of nice when a person, they're not saying, "I'm helpless," but they're saying, "In and of myself, I have an extreme limitation that I will not, under my own power, be able to overcome." That's a bold admission. I cannot handle this. I can't do it. Nothing in and of myself is going to fix this. And so a person starts to see that. Then they start to say, "Well, what would be good? What would be helpful? How could I grow? How could I mature without this thing?" And that's where real life, new life begins for a lot of people. It's not just about stopping. It's about recovery and restoration and healing and transforming a life that maybe has been plagued with limitation after limitation. And then finally, you admit it. "I'm not going to be able to fix this." And when you do, you have just taken the hardest step, the first step toward getting better. So have you ever admitted an extreme limitation? Let me tell you, taking the first step, it's the hardest step until you take it. And then the second step is the hardest step. And that's what we're going to talk about next time here on Going Deeper. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for joining me for Going Deeper. I hope something I've said may have helped just a little bit. If you have a question you'd like me to answer or comment, just email me at stevesocial@newlife.com. I'll see you next time.
If you want to support Going Deeper with Stephen Arterburn, be sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. And if you know someone who would benefit from this episode, be sure to share it with them. See you on the next Going Deeper with Stephen Arterburn from New Life Ministries.